So guys, finally the Commanders pulled the trigger on Stefon Diggs and signed him on a one-year deal. You know, throughout the whole offseason, we keep pushing hard that the Commanders need another receiver beside Terry McLaurin, no matter what. And whatever we have seen during this training camp, how much Jayden Daniels and the offense struggle, finally, Adam Peters goes out and signs Stefon Diggs. It also means the Brandon Ayuk chapter is also close. But, you know, this is not only the offense was struggling in training practices and management thought we should bring another weapon, it is actually management saw something that others didn't and took a step. So, let me explain you the real motive behind this signing at 11th hour, and I also want to touch on Day 7 practice updates because that was not a normal practice. Actually, it was so intense that head coach Dan Quinn himself had to step in and interfere. So, let me dig out more details for you. What's up, Commanders Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook, Commanders. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, before moving to the Day 7 practice updates, let me discuss Stefon Diggs. He's officially a Commander now. He signed a one-year deal worth up to $12 million, pending his physical, and honestly, that's a lot more than most people expected. Now, I know some people are going to hear this name and just think, oh, another receiver, cool, but let's talk about who Diggs actually is for a second, because I feel like people sleep on this. This is a guy approaching the top 25 all-time in receiving yards, top 30 all-time in receiving touchdowns. That's not a depth piece. That's a guy who's building a Hall of Fame resume, and he's coming into Washington with plenty left in the tank. So, let's talk about what Diggs actually looks like on the field right now, because he's not the same guy he was back with the Buffalo Bills, and that's okay. That's just part of getting older in this league. Back then, he was your classic outside receiver. Fast, physical, went up and won those deep balls one-on-one. That was his whole game. Now, he's changed a bit. He's more comfortable working underneath, running routes out of the slot instead of always going deep. And honestly, that might actually be a scarier version of him for this offense. Don't get it wrong, he can still go get the ball down the field when he needs to. But what really stands out when you watch his tape is just how smooth he looks. The way he tracks the ball in the air, the way he plucks it out with those hands, that little push-off he gives right at the top of his route to create just enough space. That's not something a coach teaches you. That comes from years of playing the game. It's pure instinct at this point. And I think that's where this gets really interesting for Jayden Daniels. When a quarterback trusts a receiver like that, it changes everything. Last year with the New England Patriots, there were moments where Drake May just stared him down and let him go win the rep. That kind of trust between a passer and a receiver is rare, and if Daniels builds that same chemistry, this offense gets a whole lot scarier. And I can easily remember how desperate Diggs himself was for joining the Commanders, and how confident he was that he openly claimed that just name one true WR2 better than him. So, you are not getting just a wide receiver, you are getting a true top-class wide receiver that actually can make you a Super Bowl contender immediately. Okay, now let's shift and talk about how this actually changes the room, because there's a lot to unpack here. The obvious name that comes up is Antonio Williams. A lot of fans were excited about him stepping into a bigger role, and I get it, there's some overlap in how these two guys play. But instead of looking at this as a roadblock for Williams, I actually think it's the opposite. This is what you hope Antonio Williams becomes down the line, a guy with that kind of route-running feel and that kind of ball skill, but he needs time to grow into it, and that's exactly why this signing matters. Now you've got a veteran in the room who can mentor him, show him the details, the inside stem on an option route, the double move at the top, how to manipulate a defender with one extra step. That kind of mentorship in the room is honestly priceless for a young receiver still figuring things out. And down the line, once Williams is ready, imagine 3 receiver sets with him, McLaurin and Diggs, all on the field together, all capable of winning one-on-one. That's the kind of dynamic playmaking this offense could eventually have. And it's not just Williams. Think about Treylon Burks and Chig okonkwoO and how much was being asked of both of them before this move. Guys were basically being told, you need to be a monster this year, we need 75 catches from you, 45 from you. Now that pressure gets spread out. Everybody gets to develop at their own pace instead of being rushed into a role they're not ready for yet. And once those guys mature into their roles as the year goes on, that's when this offense really opens up. Now, everybody assumed Terry McLaurin was locked in as the guy getting 10 targets a game no matter what. But now you've got Diggs who might actually end up with more targets in certain weeks just based on how routes are distributed. McLaurin profiles as more of that traditional vertical threat, one-on-one on the perimeter, take the top off the defense, let him go win his matchup. Diggs, on the other hand, looks like the guy underneath, moving around the formation, drawing linebackers in coverage, running those options and choice routes that are tough to defend. So, you could see a world where Diggs drives the tempo of the offense with quick pitch and catch throws that keep the chains moving, while McLaurin delivers the knockout blow downfield with the bigger chunk plays. 2 very different roles, but both incredibly valuable, and honestly, that's exactly the kind of positionless, interchangeable receiver room that gives a play caller like David Blue so many options to work with. And, you know, blocking is something people don't always bring up. Diggs actually blocks well, like legitimately throws himself into it, digs out safeties, does the dirty work that doesn't show up on a stat sheet. He was genuinely selfless in the run game last year, clearing guys out so other players could get touches. That tells you a lot about the kind of teammate and competitor he is, regardless of whatever reputation follows him from past stops. And look, I'm not going to pretend there isn't some history here. The Bills, the Vikings, both ended in situations where things got a little messy, and there's always going to be some questions about how Diggs fits into a locker room long term. That's fair to bring up. But from what's being said around the building, the locker room presence has actually been really positive. People who've been around him describe him as a great teammate, someone who genuinely helps younger guys develop and grow into their roles. So maybe the reputation doesn't tell the whole story, and honestly, winning tends to smooth over a lot of that stuff anyway. So if I'm ranking the pass catchers right now, it's Diggs and McLaurin at the top, then Treylon Burks, then Antonio Williams, then Luke McCaffrey, then Dyami Brown and Jalen Lane rounding things out. And honestly, that depth is what makes this signing feel so different from years past. It's not just about replacing a need, it's about stacking talent on top of talent and giving a young quarterback like Jayden Daniels more weapons than he's ever had in his young career. Now, let's move to the Day 7 practice, which was honestly the most heated practice so far. It was warm, wet, humid, and players were going at each other throughout the day. We saw several skirmishes, a lot of chirping, and highly spirited competition on both sides of football. And things got so intense at one point that Dan Quinn himself had to step in and stop the players. Actually, he had to do it twice. But I don't want you to look too far into this and think there is some kind of serious problem inside the locker room. These guys were not fighting because they hate each other. This was the first practice in pads, the weather was uncomfortable, and both units were desperate to prove a point. The defense had controlled the early part of camp, but over the last few practices, the offense has started fighting back. And on Day 7, they didn't just fight back, they punched the defense right in the mouth. The biggest offensive story was Luke McCaffrey. He continues to improve, and this might have been his best practice of camp so far. From what was seen on the field, McCaffrey finished with 3 touchdown catches, and what stood out even more was how often Jayden Daniels was looking for him. This was not McCaffrey just getting lucky because a play broke down. Daniels was actively searching for him, trusting him, and giving him chances to make plays. And one rep really showed what kind of day McCaffrey was having. Frankie Louvu came across the middle and delivered a huge hit on him. Louvu absolutely made his presence felt, but McCaffrey still held on to the football. That is exactly what you want to see from a young receiver trying to earn a bigger role. It is not only about getting open, it is about finishing the play when a physical linebacker is coming downhill and trying to separate you from the ball. Terry McLaurin was also doing what Terry McLaurin always does. He was winning matchups and making life difficult for the secondary. Actually, he was having so much success against Mike Sainers still that the defense had to make an adjustment and move Rasul Douglas onto him. And once Douglas started covering Terry, things became a little more balanced. That was another impressive sign from Douglas because he continues to look like one of the favorites to start a cornerback on opening day. He has experience, he understands how to adjust during practice, and he is showing that he can handle the responsibility of matching up with Washington's best receiver. Mick Robertson had the day off, but even then he was still on the sideline supporting his teammates and bringing energy, and that is something I really liked about this practice. Yes, players were chirping. Yes, there were moments when things crossed the line, but once practice ended, these guys still walked off the field together. The competition was intense, but the camaraderie was still there. On defense, Sonny Styles continues to be everywhere. You keep seeing number 52 around the football, and every day he looks a little more comfortable. He is starting to settle into his role, react faster, and play with more confidence. Joshua Josephs also took advantage of a huge opportunity. With K'Lavon Chaisson receiving the day off, Josephs got first-team reps, and he did not waste them. He was active, he was around the football, and he made his presence felt throughout practice. These are the opportunities that can completely change a young player's position on the depth chart. When a starter sits out, the coaching staff wants to see who steps forward, and Josephs did exactly that. And the offensive line also deserves credit because Dan Quinn admitted that the group is beginning to settle in. The first padded practice exposed some issues with players getting too high and not playing underneath their pads, but Quinn also saw good technique and physicality. The biggest challenge is not talent. It is getting all these new faces to work together as one unit. And on Day 7, they finally started showing real progress.